Greetings, dear viewer, and welcome to Purposes Crossed, where I hope that people who are called by Jesus for different purposes cross paths and exchange ideas. In this video, we will continue with our series of reflections on the Sermon on the Mount, and this will be the second video on Matthew chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. This is the 20th video in the series and takes a second look at those two verses. In the previous video, we saw that a surface level reading of Jesus' words revealed two options. False teachers will either lose salvation or they will lose face. We saw that the Sermon on the Mount is not describing the conditions for salvation. Rather, Jesus is describing what life in the kingdom of God will look like. At the end of the video, I asked the question, but does that mean that in the kingdom of God, there will be those who have actually lost face? What is Jesus really doing in these two verses? What we need to do is approach Jesus' words in the same way as which he approached Torah in the Sermon on the Mount. If we treat Torah legalistically, we will find ways to circumvent it and find loopholes. That is what people do with laws. We will feel trapped by it and make it a burden too heavy to bear. This is what Jesus labels the righteousness of the Pharisees. However, if we see in it the glimpses of God's design and purposes, then we can take Torah a step further. To do so would be to surpass the righteousness of the Pharisees. Jesus does this in the Sermon on the Mount. How do we use this approach to understand his words? First, we must not believe that Jesus is laying down a law. Rather, just as Torah is primarily instruction rather than law, so also Jesus is instructing us. Second, we must allow Jesus the full use of language, including parabolic and hyperbolic language. Like a good rabbi, he asks us to choose between a rock and a hard place. This is not to confound us, rather, it is to invite us to struggle with the instruction. Third, we should struggle with Jesus' instruction, for only then we will make it our own. This means not coming away with some pat answer that might sound correct, but which we cannot corroborate with in our discipleship experience. It means coming away scarred from the struggle, just as Jacob was scarred in Genesis chapter 32, and in like manner emerging with a blessing. So where do these steps take us? Let me tell you where it takes me. The unsettling choices Jesus presents us with should lead us to realize that what he is getting at is not a formula for who is in the kingdom and who is out, and at what level they are in the kingdom, if they are in the kingdom, and all that sort of thing. Rather, he is indicating the importance of the issue, and that entrance into the kingdom of God is not as cut and dry as I might like it to be, and that life in the kingdom of God is much more complicated than I would like it to be. Obeying Torah and teaching others to obey is extremely important. Indeed, I may not take it lightly. Yet, no formula can assure me a place in the kingdom. Indeed, the rule of grace is precisely not the rule of law or formula. And Jesus is telling me not to take grace for granted. He is asking me to live in that gray area in which grace is still a miracle, in which discipleship is still an adventure, in which I grow to be even more dependent on him while understanding him better. You see, the way to approach Jesus' cryptic words is to first believe that he knows what he is saying, that he would not ask us to do something that we could not accomplish with his grace, and that he will give us strength to obey him. If we think that his words are burdensome at any level, then it is because we have misunderstood him. For he himself says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Life is complicated, and life in the kingdom of God is even more so complicated because we cannot use means that are in opposition to the purposes of the kingdom. Decisions are not going to be black and white in nature, and Jesus asks us to follow him in that difficult task of discipleship in the graves.